think it's just
good luck, guys.
Thank you very much.
I would have to think that it's just so like direct, like yeah, it's just kind of a condition of how things are. It's not just it's because like, you know, if you ask like a similar question like why aren't like our AAA game designers like super tight or whatever? Well, AAA companies are, you know, hundreds, thousands of people or whatever, all these layers of bureaucracy and managers. It's like, I mean, it's like going to work in an office. You know, it's like indie games are just like dudes making games. You know, it's like it reminds me a lot of when I was in bands, just playing around. It's just like a few dudes doing like this creative thing that they all love to do, get together and get high.
That's the thing. You know what I think the answer is actually? Is that if we all hated each other, there's no way we could do this.
Yeah.
Because it's too hard. So.
But weren't we supposed to talk about our favorite indie games? Yes, whatever.
Yeah, but I wasn't following.
What's your favorite? Oh, well, I actually really like Altitude, and there's I'm totally gay for tower defense games, and there's a game on Steam called Soul Survivor. That's a cool story, bro.
I'm totally gay for tower defense.
The ponder is in that one statement.
Hey, I want to bring that back real quick. I'm sorry, but no, I was playing this great game on Pirates Bay, Coast of Boy, and it was fantastic.
So there are alternative distribution methods.
Isn't that a gay porn game?
No, it's a warm blast. No, this one's serious, I promise. This is an actual blood. Alright, I mean, there's a lot of awesome student games out there, of course. There's this one called Put Me Out, which was actually from our class. Not me put out, I saw that. It's not a nation.
I didn't do anything!
It's a fantastic multiplayer fighter game. So, putting stuff out there.
I got next.
Very!
I missed the question. Like, how important is math?
To be heard.
You have to know it, or you have to know how to use Google. I mean, to be honest, you know, you have to know it, and Tom knows most of it for us. I just find myself looking things up over and over again, how to do them. But if you don't want to feel ridiculous all the time, you have to know it.
And to add to this, from my experience, I programmed most of our game engine code and the 3D graphics stuff for our other game, which did not get selected, which was one that I mainly worked on. Just got selected. But there are just a few things that come up over and over again. Like, I've never used any like calculus or anything. I'm sure I could do fancy things with that, but just like, you basically like matrix multiplication and like understanding certain like sine waves, and then everything else you look up. But through my math courses, I guess I was forced to use those things over and over again. So overall, the way that math teaches you to think about things can be helpful, because there's also a lot of thinking about things in a very logical or optimizational way that you learn a lot from math. But then beyond that, there are just a few basic things that we use over and over again and forget over and over again.
Yeah, not every programmer needs to know their math, but a huge number and a huge amount of programming has absolutely no math in it directly. But the problem is that occasionally math will be super useful, and if you're not familiar with the relevant math, you might not realize that this is really a well-known, understood problem, and there's a function, in C for it. And so you need to have someone who knows their math to know when to plug it in.
Yeah, it's also kind of deceptive, because the programming you're doing in school really doesn't need any math. But if you ever get into, graphics programming or physics programming or even weird stuff, when Rob was programming our supply system, he ended up using a whole lot of really complicated formulas, which neither of us think we're particularly good at math, and I kind of wish I paid more attention to it in school. But luckily, we do have the internet, and we don't actually need to be good at math, because we only need to get it right once. And after that, the computer gets it right every time after that.
It really depends on the programs you're writing. I mean, especially in games, math is so important. Studying linear algebra is probably the biggest one. Calculus, I haven't really seen too much of a use for, but I'm only a junior. But I mean, seriously though, I mean, creating homing bullets, or just bullets in general, you have to know trajectory, you have to know the vectoring and all that cool stuff. So, I mean, linear algebra is definitely important.
I think math is worthless.
So, for those of you that aren't in school, I'm curious, why this path? Why not the comfort of the steady paycheck?
Yeah, you really?
Huh?
Like, I'm going to school 4 years.
I know, but I'm talking about.
You know,
So, what is your future? I'll rephrase. I will ask directly. When you get out of school,
yes.
are you going to be an indie game developer on your own, or do you want to go work for a giant developer?
See, that's a really tough question. I've been asking myself that tons and tons of times. Because, I mean, there's plenty of companies out there that are freaking awesome, like Genova Chen for that game company, like doing stuff like Flower. So I could do something that I really love, and it'd be fantastic, and I would be able to go home at night and sleep well. But then there's other things like Microsoft that wants to pay me $80,000 to go on Facebook. It's a really tough decision, but I'm kind of leaning towards indie dev, to be blatantly honest.
Okay. So those that, for the rest of you, why not choose a path that allows you to have an 8 to 5, well, sometimes, depending on much, and a steady paycheck? What is it that is driving your passion to this part of it?
Well, for now, I do have a steady paycheck. So as long as if people start buying Hegemony, then that's gonna continue. But actually, when I was in school, I kind of expected that I'd start going to a really boring software development job, and then eventually work my way into one of the giants. And then I had seen a forum post on the IGDA of one of the guys at my company saying, "Hey, we're looking for this programmer we talked to who wanted a job at our place." And I responded and I was like, "Well, I'm not him, but if you're looking to hire a programmer, I'm available." So at the time, I'd never realized that indie game development would be as enjoyable as it is. But I get to wear so many hats. It's not just programming that I do. I also get to do a lot of design, a lot of writing, stuff like that. And I wouldn't give that up to work at a giant company.
Yeah, I'd like to say creative freedom, but the reality is that I just hate working for other people, so.
Valid answer. Completely valid.
Yeah, this is our first game, but we've actually been sort of an independent company for 7 years. We made a 3D modeling program, and then we made a photography application, and now we're making games. And it's just, there have been points along the way where we could sort of, sell out and go work with the company, and it just always seemed worth it to do this instead. That's not to say it won't change in the future, but it's always just felt like the right thing to do.
Okay.
So it's, if some AAA game came along, I mean, I'm a huge, giant, stupid hippie, and I'm all, indie bro, whatever, but, I mean, literally, that's just
I want to give you a hug.
I get that a lot. But anyway, so this is, what's been presented to me already, and it's a lot of fun, and, right now I happen to be doing pretty well, so, I'm comfortable with it, but I don't really have anything against doing, like, AAA work, and, it's more money, and cocaine's expensive.
They say pot's not a gateway drug. You just work your way right up there. So we're going to wrap up the panel with just kind of get to know you, and what all of you are kind of indie gaming. I assume you say you can't play any more, but what games have inspired you? What are your favorite games? We can start directly to my right and work our way in.
I grew up on a diet of classic rock, Weird Al Yankovic, and video game music, and probably the #1 influence on me was Nobuo Uematsu of Final Fantasy. I think he's the greatest composer of all time, without a doubt. But you know, I don't know what conditions created the music of that time, but just like, you know, all of it. Mega Man, you know, Koji Kondo with all the Super Mario stuff, you know, and it's so great to see all that stuff coming back and such a, you know, resurgence of all that stuff.
Personally, right now I'm getting a lot of inspiration from Flower and like games that are out there trying to do different things, like providing some kind of emotional response. And it's, yeah, something different out there, so I'm really enjoying something like that.
I'm definitely like kind of an old school platformer kind of guy, and I feel like those games are becoming popular again just because they're so good. I mean, you go back and play Mario, and yes, it's nostalgic, but it's actually also fun. And you know, it wasn't about just like the latest graphics of the time or anything like that. It's a fun game. So.
Carl and I grew up across the street from each other, and we basically spent all of our free time playing Mario Kart, GoldenEye, all the old classic multiplayer games, and then later on Counter-Strike and Dota has been huge for us. And we're playing some StarCraft 2 now. It's actually stalled now. It's 2 development.
Eric's actually in the top 200 American ladder, if you're wondering why there hasn't been a patch.
It's turned into a confessional a little bit.
That's not being recorded, is it?
Yeah, it's all being recorded at some point.
Yeah, actually, Hegemony isn't really my baby. It's our designer who didn't end up making it to PAX. Most of his inspirations have been numerous strategy games, a lot of stuff that a lot of people probably haven't heard of, a lot of hex-based strategy games and stuff like that. Personally, I have huge inspirations by graphic adventures.
There's one crowd in the entire world that will understand hex-based games. It's the one here at PAX.
That's true.
I think we have a t-shirt that says, "You had me at hex-based."
It's true. I just don't want to speak on behalf of him because he can probably name some stuff that I've never heard of. But personally, I'm really inspired by a lot of graphic adventures, and I think that there's a lot of room to innovate there. So I'm hoping I get to do something like that eventually.
Give a big round of applause to our panelists.